Coming in at number 10, we have Kamala Khan, aka the latest and greatest Ms. Marvel. Originally just an Avengers fangirl growing up with her parents in Jersey City, Kamala Khan's life was changed forever when the Terrigen Mists incident took place and activated her hidden inhuman powers. Kamala was amazed to discover she was actually a polymorph and was capable of completely altering the size of her body. Inspired by her lifelong hero, Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, Kamala Khan became the next generation's Ms. Marvel, using her powers as a member of the Young Avengers and becoming the type of hero she'd always dreamed of becoming. Coming in at number 9, we have the iconic vampire killer known as Blade. Born as a human-vampire hybrid named Eric Brooks, Blade has all of the powers of a Marvel Universe vampire with nearly none of the negative side effects. He possesses superhuman strength and speed, with all of his senses heightened to make him a perfect predator, while being immune to damage from sunlight, silver, or holy artifacts that would instantly turn a regular vampire powerless. While he does still need the nutrients from fresh human blood to prevent himself from losing control of his hunger, Blade often uses a special serum as opposed to actually draining the blood of any humans. With so many strengths and so little weaknesses, Blade is definitely a blood-sucking force to be reckoned with. Coming in at number 8, we have the crazed character known as Gwenpool. One of the weirder characters from throughout the Marvel multiverse, Gwendolyn Poole is originally from an alternate reality that just might be our own, before somehow getting sucked into the Marvel 616 universe through a comic book, granting her even more fourth wall breaking powers than even her namesake of Deadpool. With the ability to manipulate all aspects of her comic book world, such as physically interacting with lettering and caption boxes, Gwenpool is capable of literally rewriting reality to get the upper hand on her opponents, making her powers some of the most unusual throughout all of Marvel history, but still counting as some of the most powerful to ever come from a teen hero. Coming in at number 7, we have Vulcan, the secret third brother of Scott and Alex Summers, also known as Gabriel Summers. Born on the Shi'ar throne world following his parents' abduction by the Shi'ar Empire, Gabriel was aged rapidly in an incubation accelerator, and discovered he was an Omega-level mutant far above his brother's power back on Earth, giving him the unique ability to control the elements of water, wind, earth, fire, electricity, light, and darkness, using these incredible powers to take over the Shi'ar Empire and become their new emperor. And while this position of power would occasionally bring him into conflict with the X-Men, he still could generally be counted upon to fight for the side of good with his incredibly impressive power set. Coming in at number 6, we have the upcoming Disney Plus star, Moon Knight. A street-level Marvel hero with powers that go far beyond the usual street, Mark Spector is a vessel for an Egyptian god known as Khonshu. Able to embrace the 4 different aspects of this deity as 4 distinct personalities within his own head, Moon Knight is strongest under the light of a full moon, giving him physical strength far beyond that of a normal man, and a pain tolerance that is nearly limitless. On top of his supernatural abilities, Mark is also an expert in both weaponry and hand-to-hand combat, combining them with his moon-based powers into a deadly combination that makes him one of the ultimate crime fighters and mercenaries in the entire Marvel world. Coming in at number 5, we have Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. One of the original members of the Fantastic Four, Ben Grimm found his entire body converted into an orange rock-like substance after being bombarded with cosmic rays alongside the rest of the Fantastic Four during their initial fated journey into space. Because of this transformation, Ben has become the physically strongest member of the team by far, and appears to be continuing to get stronger with age, capable of lifting 30,000 tons worth of a building to prevent it from collapsing, and even being able to push back entire alien motherships. He might often get overlooked compared to some of the other brawny Marvel heroes like Thor and the Hulk, but The Thing is definitely a strong contender whenever it counts. Coming in at number 4, we have the Sorcerer Supreme, aka Dr. Stephen Stephen Strange. Doctor Strange is Earth's primary defender against mystical threats in the Marvel Universe, and always seems to have some sort of spell available to solve whatever problem is currently facing Earth's mightiest heroes. As a master of the mystic arts, Strange has also entirely stopped aging and is effectively immortal, being unable to die from any medical diseases or regular symptoms of old age. And when Strange recently did die in the Marvel comic called The Death of Doctor Strange, he had already concocted a way for a younger version of himself from the timeline to take his place and defend Earth against any extra-dimensional forces that might seek to take advantage of his own death. There's planning ahead, and then there's Dr. Stephen Strange taking it to a whole different level. Coming in at number 3, we have Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. As one of the earlier members of the Uncanny X-Men, Bobby has had a lot of time over the years to explore his powers, and contrary to appearances, he can do far more than just convert his body into ice. Classified as an Omega level mutant, the most powerful kind there is, Iceman is capable of not only controlling the temperature of all of his own molecules, but is able to manipulate water molecules entirely as part of his own mass. This means the possibilities for Bobby's powers are as intense and malleable as water itself, allowing him to freeze the blood within enemies' veins, travel instantly through a stream of water, or even turn himself into a massive snow-covered giant capable of wading his way across the literal ocean. Totally not showing off there, Bobby. Totally not. Coming in at number 2, we have Peter Parker, aka the Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man definitely isn't known for being a weakling, but his actual physical strength is actually far beyond what anyone in even the Marvel Universe would expect. Under situations of intense stress, Peter Parker has been shown as capable of lifting literal tons worth of rubble and debris, far beyond the usual strength that he generally seems to show off. And when Peter Parker's body was briefly taken over by Otto Octavius's brain, the villain was stunned to discover that Spider-Man has actually been holding back every punch he's ever thrown, after the villain controlling Peter's body accidentally punched the Scorpion's jaw right off. Maybe it's a good idea to not try and get punched by Spider-Man. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Incredible Hulk, a character who's known for being strong, but might actually be the most underrated when it comes to just how strong he can become. Ever since being bombarded with gamma rays, Bruce Banner's limits for physical strength have been said to be practically non-existent, with all-knowing characters like the Beyonder outright stating that the Hulk has no limits to his physical strength. The only difference between different Hulk forms is their starting strength, with all of them still having the potential to theoretically complete feats such as outpulling a black hole. It's this endless capacity for potential destruction that has made the Hulk such an alluring target to evil forces over the years, but if the Hulk's proven anything, it's that maybe he's not a guy you should try to mind control.
And it said Midnighter. Midnighter, alongside his future husband Apollo, was part of the top secret Stormwatch team created by the first Weatherman, Henry Bendix. Nobody but Bendix himself knew of the team's existence. Bendix built them as superhumans, and when they donned their costumes and spoke their code names, their previous identities ceased to exist. Midnighter has the power to predict how a situation will happen before it starts. This allows him to run through a given situation millions of times in his mind, instantly covering every possible result before his first move is even made. He uses this information to predict the actions and or reactions of others, counteracting their moves almost before they even think to make them, effectively making Midnighter the greatest tactician in the history of mankind. Basically the good guy version of the Thinker. That's pretty cool. He could be Batman, just because he knew every single way it would happen. And at 9, the Atomic Knight. The Atomic Knights appeared in every third issue of Strange Adventures in the early 1960s, beginning with number 117 and running through number 160. In all, there were 15 early 1960s Atomic Knight stories created by writer John Broome and artist Murphy Anderson. They were a band of heroes living in and protecting the post-apocalyptic future of 1992. Yep, at that point it was the future. Following the catastrophic hydrogen war of 1986, a petty tyrant named the Black Baron ruled a small section of the Midwestern United States with an iron fist. He was opposed by Sergeant Gardner Grail of the Atomic Knights, who wore medieval suits of armor that were impervious to the Baron's energy weapons, the armor having been irradiated in the war. Gardner Grail also has precognition and wears a suit of armor that grants him enhanced speed, strength, endurance, and lets him blast energy, as well as being adaptable to other technology. And at 8, Akrita. Andrea's father was Bernardo Gerardo Rojas, once a renowned leader in Central America who researched pre-Hispanic cultures at a university in Mexico. She lived alone with her cat named Zapata, named after one of the revolutionary leaders in Mexico. Acrata specialized in striking against organized crime. Every time she caught a perpetrator or helped avert a tragedy, she cited a literary quotation, or if she had the time, painted graffiti insulting or challenging the local authorities, which might hint at her being a bit of an anarchist, which honestly I'm kinda into. This character seemed to be kind of a Mexican Batman, and despite her anarchist tendencies, she often worked with another two Mexican superheroes, Iman and El Muerto. Together with these two allies and Superman, she once saved Mexico and the world from the total destruction from a bad guy group trying to channel the powers inherent to the ley lines of Earth to accomplish their goals. So good on ya, Andrea. Good on you. In its 7th Jack-O-Lantern. The first Jack-O-Lantern is Daniel Cormac of Ireland, who was born to a poor farmer who was granted a magical lantern by an Irish fairy. Yep, that's how we're going with this. Cormac is a member of the Global Guardians, an international group of superheroes. His first recorded mission in Super Friends number 8 was to help Green Lantern dismantle a bomb in Ireland. Both Daniel Cormac and Marvin Noronza, the second Jack-O-Lantern, have a mystical lantern that gives them the power of flight, flame projection, teleportation, illusion casting, enhanced strength, and the ability to just create fogs. The power of the lantern is also its weakest at noon and gradually increases until its peak at midnight. Liam McHugh, the third Jack-O-Lantern, found a way to internalize the powers of the mystical lantern and no longer needs to carry it. So yeah. In its 6th, Apollo. Essentially the Wildstorm universe's answer to Superman, Apollo is now technically a part of the DC superhero universe, like Wildstorm ever since the two universes converged following the events of Flashpoint. Apollo possesses many of the same powers as Superman, but with a few notable differences. Like Kal-El, Apollo possesses superhuman strength, flight, and near invulnerability. If you want some clarification as to just how impervious to damage he is, he's able to walk on the surface of the sun. Apollo also has the ability to shoot lasers from his eyes, derived from solar energy, but unlike Superman, he can also release this energy from other parts of his body, including his hands and mouth. This dude can fire lasers from his mouth. He uses hyper beam in real life. His only real weakness is that he relies on the sun for his powers, so if he doesn't get enough exposure, his powers will diminish, but hey, at least Apollo isn't vulnerable to kryptonite. Halfway through into number 5, Swamp Thing. In a secret facility located in the Louisiana swamplands, scientist Alec Holland and his wife Linda invented a bio-restorative formula that would solve any nation's food shortage problem. Ferret and Bruno, thugs working for Nathan Ellery, barged into Alec's lab, knocked him out, and planted a bomb in the facility. Alec woke up just as the bomb exploded, and in the flames he ran into the swamp. His body had been drenched in the bio-restorative formula, and this affected the plant life of the swamp, imbuing it with Alex's consciousness and memories. The newly conscious plant life then formed a semblance of a human form and rose up from the bog as the Swamp Thing, the latest in a long line of Earth elementals created when the Green was in need of protection. His body is composed of sentient vegetable matter, he has the ability to nourish himself, superhuman strength, elemental control, chlorokinesis, astral projection, biofission, immortality, regeneration, size alteration, resurrection, you name it, and Swampy can do it. Swampy away! And in 4, Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle was scot-free, the god of escape in the New Gods mythology. A Genesian raised on Apokolips, he defected with his lover Big Barda to Earth, where he used the skills he learned in escapology, both as a performance artist and in the Justice League of America. Originally, the boy scot-free was the son of High Father Isaiah, the ruler of New Genesis. However, as a part of a diplomatic move to stop a destructive war against the planet Apokolips, High Father agreed to an exchange of children with his enemy Darkseid. In doing so, he surrendered scot-free to the care of his enemy while he received his enemy's son Orion. This guy has new god physiology, okay, making him immortal, super strength, super durable, and giving him super agility. Plus, when utilizing his full godly potential, Mr. Miracle wields a cosmic energy field called Alpha Effect, which allows him to transverse through time and space, heal living beings, fully restore creatures back from death, and control energy to an almost boundless degree. Yep, you're on the list. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Jem, Son of Saturn. After both his mother and teacher were killed by the White Martians, Jem stole a ship and escaped to Earth, in search of his lover Syra, who had fled there earlier. He arrives in Harlem, New York and is befriended by an orphan named Luther Mankin. After a series of adventures with and without Luther, Jem eventually found Syra. They all then traveled to New Bok, a red Saturnian colony, but because he refused to take sides in a civil war on New Bok, Jem was disavowed and cast out by both factions. Dispirited, Jem and Luther return to Earth, and given that Jem is a form of Martian in a sense, his Saturnian physiology gives him flight, metamorphosis, physiokinesis, telekinesis, telepathy, energy projection, superhuman durability, superhuman stamina, and superhuman strength that allows him to match Martian Manhunter blow for blow. So I think this is a pretty worthy number 3. Penultimately, in at number 2, Karate Kid. Karate Kid is actually Val Armor, a superhero from the future and also a member of the Legion of Superheroes. He is a master of every form of martial arts to have ever been developed by the 30th century. The extent of his skill was so great that he could severely damage various types of hard material with a single blow, and was briefly able to hold his own against Superboy through the use of what he called super karate. So he already seems pretty legit. Val Armor was the son of Japanese greatest crime lord Kiaru Nuzumi, also known as the Black Dragon. When he was born, his mother, an American secret agent known as Valentina Armor, tried to hide him from his father, but she failed to do so and was killed for her affront. Japan's biggest hero, Sensei Toshiaki, and the White Crane, eventually killed the Black Dragon for his crimes and then adopted the infant Val. He raised Val as if he were his own son and trained him in all manner of martial arts. Val became the youngest warrior ever to earn the title of samurai, and he went on to work for his local shogun. However, after trying his best and failing to please his supervisor, he quit and searched the galaxy for new forms of battle to master. That just goes to show you, people, appreciate your employees, otherwise they're gonna quit and go search the galaxy for new forms of martial arts, okay? And finally, in at number 1, Blue Beetle. Jamie Reyes was a relatively normal high school student from El Paso, Texas. His father ran a garage and his mother was a paramedic, and he had a little sister who was a total brat. Jamie hung out with his 2 best friends, Brenda and Paco, and he acted as like the mediator between the hardworking Brenda and the laid-back Paco. By both Brenda and Paco's accounts, he was a good friend, kind of person who could just let them be themselves and would always make things better. Jamie aimed to help his father out in the garage, but Alberto turned him down, not wanting to see his son grow up too fast. Ted Cord, the second Blue Beetle, had come into possession of the Blue Beetle Scarab, the artifact which had given Dan Garrett, the first Blue Beetle, his powers. The Scarab had been presumed destroyed early in Ted's superhero career, but it was discovered intact in a pyramid in the Middle East. This is where Jamie gets his powers as well. What are those powers, you ask? The Scarab can and will use its powers of its own accord. Jamie, however, can override the Scarab if need be, and should Jeremy fall prey to mind-altering power, the Scarab will take control of the armor. So it will act on its own, and basically he's not mind control anymore because it's just the Scarab doing it, not actually him.
Number 10, Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer gains the power of the Infinity Gauntlet in a what-if story from the 1989 series featured in issue 49 of that series. What if Silver Surfer possessed the Infinity Gauntlet? Well, he would obviously try to use the power for good. He ends up being lifted up into godhood because he wields such awesome power and attempts to turn the universe into a paradise, eradicating hunger and disease for all races across the cosmos. Also, fun fact, did you know that back in the day when you had the Infinity Gauntlet you were considered a god and that was like part of the story? That was a thing. Silver Surfer also makes Death a more approachable hot lady, so that when people die they will not fear her but cherish her instead. I mean, I personally think Death was already hot before, but I guess now she's more hot, so that's great. In the end, unfortunately, even Silver Surfer becomes corrupted by the Gauntlet's power. However, our heroes have a solution for that and introduce Shala Bal, Norrin Radd's lost love, into the mix. She manages to be able to level with Norrin and even convinces him to renounce the power, saving the world with this final sacrifice. And her final sacrifice too, because they're both like, okay, well, we're just gonna die now, bye. Number 9, Nebula. Nebula is a complicated character. She's not really a full-on villain and she's not really a full-on hero, but I feel like her portrayal by Karen Gillan in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy series has helped us to see her more as a villain worth redeeming and moving more into the realm of hero than anything else. And in honor of that, I'm going to count her as such for the purpose of this list. One of the last times I was reading a sort of hero Nebula story was when she teamed up with Thane, Star Fox or Eros if you will, and Trico Slatteris, the champion of the universe, to seemingly defeat Thanos. In reality, Thane was using them for his own means, and when Nebula found this out, she attempted to defeat Thane herself. In the comics, she was one of the characters to get her hands on the Infinity Gauntlet during the events of the Infinity Gauntlet story. She ended up being the really big bad when she took the gauntlet from Thanos and then had to be defeated thereafter. At that time, Nebula was pretty much a villain, so yeah. But like I said, we can kind of consider her a hero, so she was a villain at the time, but she's still a hero. Does that make sense? I'm counting it, whatever. It's my list. I decide who stays. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like this where we talk about who's wielding the Infinity Gauntlet and what they did with it, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I personally would love to see like an alternate Thanos Infinity Gauntlet list as well. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if we have enough alternate Thanoses for that list, but I think it would be cool if we could do it. Number 8. Deadpool. Surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly if you're familiar with the character, Deadpool also has wielded the Infinity Gauntlet before. In this case, he ended up getting it from Thanos when he pulled a bait and switch, swapping out the real gauntlet with a fake. Deadpool then planned to use the gauntlet to roast the Marvel Universe, but instead got celebrity roasted himself by host Howard the Duck and a slew of other heroes, villains, friends, allies, and even lovers. In the end, however, Deadpool breaks the fourth wall to do some roasting of the audience and ultimately returns the gauntlet to its rightful owner. Thanos, of course. What did you think? He was gonna give it to someone else and save the day? This is still Deadpool we're talking about. Also, I'm pretty sure the issue this story comes from, issue 45 of Jerry Dugan's Deadpool run from 2013, is also where the Thanos copter originated. Either way, if you're a fan of Thanos copter, it is in there too. Thanos copter. Thanos is flying around in it. Number 7. Gamora. Gamora ended up using the Infinity Gem's combined power to fold the universe in half, creating Warp World in the comics. Warp World contained only combined Marvel characters who were all composed of two different souls, like Emma Frost and Wolverine, who were combined together to create Diamond Patch, or Weapon Hex, a combination of Laura Kinney aka X-23 and Scarlet Witch. Technically, Gamora didn't use a gauntlet specifically to do this, but she did utilize the power of all the gems, which makes it, I think, close enough for her to rank here. At the time, what she was doing was, well, pretty villainous. But Gamora in general is considered to be a hero, in modern comics especially. Well, when she's not stealing gems and folding the universe in half, of course, which is also from modern comics. To check out this story, you'd want to check out Infinity Wars, so go do that, because Warp World is cool. Number 6. Black Panther. T'Challa was the one to use the Infinity Gauntlet against God Emperor Doom on his own created version of Battleworld. Doom's created version of Battleworld, not T'Challa's, just to be clear. This reality was a patchwork one created by Doom after the inevitable destruction of the Incursions. Doom faced T'Challa and Namor, the former of which also came wielding the Infinity Gauntlet. While initially T'Challa succeeded in defeating Doom, he inevitably regenerated and then destroyed the Infinity Gauntlet in turn. However, while Doom beat Black Panther even with the Infinity Gauntlet, it was then revealed that this had all been a part of a master plan and was intended only to distract Doom, which evidently had pretty much worked. God Emperor Doom was so OP though. RIP God Emperor Doom. Doom's still around though, so I wonder if he remembers that. No, he probably doesn't remember that. I think it all got wiped. He just remembered that he killed his arch nemesis, and he was like, I'm happy now. Also, I'm not scarred. Number 5. Mr. Fantastic. Reed Richards aimed to wield the Infinity Gauntlet, collecting the gems and assembling them all with the intention to destroy them and prevent anyone else from gaining their dangerous level of power. He used his own group of banded together heroes to find the gems and collect them. Unfortunately, his plan did not work, and he had the secret superhero Brainiac group, the Illuminati, instead become the protectors of the gems, which were then split up. Each one of them was given one to hide in the universe so that the gauntlet could never be reassembled and used against them. Of course, this didn't end up being a permanent solution to that problem, because these are the Infinity Gems, and no matter which way you slice it or split these gems up, they're eventually going to be used again by someone in the future to do some kind of good or ill. Usually though, they're used for ill. So yeah. And no matter how hard you try to hide those Infinity Gems, people go and find them. Number 4. Hulk. Obviously one of the heroes we can't leave out, considering how mighty he is and how important his time with the Gauntlet was in the MCU, is the Hulk. The Hulk wore the Infinity Gauntlet and was the one to use it to bring everyone back in the MCU. If you were wondering how a big, not super intelligent berserker like the Hulk managed this feat, managed to stay focused, this was actually during the time in the MCU where Hulk was more in balance with Bruce Banner. The two beings were more merged at this point and basically became Professor Hulk. Hulk wore the gauntlet in the MCU during Avengers Endgame and used it to bring back everyone that had been snapped out of existence, undoing what Thanos had done in the previous film, Avengers Infinity War. In the comics, in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, the alternate Hulk of that Earth also wielded the Infinity Gauntlet, or rather the Infinity Gauntlets, as in that universe there's 2 of them, but that's a story for another list. Number 3. Iron Man. Someone that has been immortalized when it comes to his use of the Infinity Gauntlet, or Iron Gauntlet if you rather, in the MCU is Iron Man. Iron Man snapped past Thanos and his army out of existence, which resulted in the heroes winning the day in Avengers Endgame. Thanos returned to try and set straight what the heroes were trying to fix in their universe, which was his plan to eliminate half the population. Hulk had successfully snapped back those who had been killed off by Thanos' initial snap, but now Tony Stark was fighting to to save the world against a past Thanos who had followed them there to once again follow through with his future self's and really his own self's plan. In using the gauntlet, however, Tony gave up his life as it was so powerful a weapon that using it killed him. Also, he kinda had to like put it in his suit, and I don't know if his suit was properly wired for all that power. This made Iron Man one of the greatest heroes eternally, but not one of the greatest Eternals, because that's a whole different group of heroes. Tony has also briefly wielded the Infinity Gauntlet in the comics, but it went quite a bit differently for him in comparison. Once again, a story for another list. Number 2, Captain America. Captain America actually also wore the gauntlet, in the comics at least. He attempted to use the gauntlet to keep Earth 616 safe during the incursions. This was a dangerous time in the comics when basically different realities were colliding and thereby destroying one another. Captain America attempted to use the power of the Infinity Gauntlet to push away the impending Earth and help prevent their collision. However, he failed in his attempt, and instead all of the stones on the gauntlet were seemingly destroyed except for the Time Stone. Probably one of the most useful stones too when you think about it in terms of like getting the other Infinity Gems back at some point. I feel like there's gonna be someone that's gonna be like, you're calling them gems and stones. What is it, Amanda? Look, they're stones I'm pretty sure in the movies, they're gems in the comics. Gems, stones, it's all the same thing. They're rocks. They're infinity rocks, that's what we should call them. Number 1, Adam Warlock. Probably one of the most famous people to wield the gauntlet when it comes to comic book heroes from Marvel is Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is often seen as a sometimes ally, sometimes opponent to Thanos, and in this case, he was kinda both. He ended up initially joining the heroes during the events of the Infinity Gauntlet in an attempt to defeat Thanos in the comics. However, they failed. When Nebula, who was known only as Thanos' granddaughter at that time, usurped Thanos, taking the power for herself, Thanos and Adam Warlock decided to team up to put a stop to her. This is when Adam Warlock got his hand on the gauntlet. However, after ascending and becoming a god thanks to the gauntlet's power, as I said that used to be a thing, he was instructed by the Living Tribunal and convinced to basically disassemble the gauntlet, hiding the gems with those that he trusted to protect them, one of which remaining with him, the Soul Stone. And I'm pretty sure Adam just like held on to that and was like, now I have the power of the Soul Stone. As if he wasn't powerful enough already. Jeez, Adam, you're already so powerful. Number 10, Draculina. To be clear, when we talk about heroes you've never heard of, we're more talking about those that sit on the outskirts of the superhero fandoms. So you won't find them likely on the big screen or on DC's or Marvel's main teams like the Justice League, Avengers, or the X-Men. Instead, these are heroes who come from a more humble background by comparison. Some of them may have been simply forgotten due to just how long they've been around, whereas others typically are associated with smaller or even in some cases now defunct publishers. Coming from the world of fellow indie hero Vampirella, Draculina is sort of Ella's adopted sister and also kind of her ex-lover or ex-one-night stand. There have actually been at least 2 different Draculinas, possibly 3 at this point. One is Lilith's biological daughter and the biological twin sister of Vampy, who is blonde. The other one, the one I'm focusing on, who was once Vampy's lover, became obsessed with her and was eventually adopted by Lilith to become the new Draculina. If you want to learn more about her and other Vampy adjacent characters, Sacred 6 is a pretty cool comic that I would recommend that you check out. Or you can learn more about this version of Draculina in the 2019 Vampirella series from Dynamite. Both of those series, by the way, are by Christopher Priest. Both Draculinas go by the name Victory, although the one we're talking about here was originally named Victoria, but the two do differ in terms of appearance and, like I said, blood relation. Blood relation in this context almost becomes a vampire pun. This new Draculina isn't exactly a vampire, by the way, but is armed with a demonic ring that basically grants her powers similar to one, allowing her to accurately play the part. Draculina is currently a property of Dynamite Comics. Number 9, Tony Chu. Tony Chu is a quirky and unique character, but still is ultimately a hero, and even technically has superpowers, so he would qualify as a superhero. Tony is a detective who possesses the unique power of sebopathy. Whatever he eats, except for beets, he gains in-depth knowledge of, being able to tell where all the ingredients that make it up came from, being able to taste everything about that ingested food. Tony uses this skill to basically solve murders mainly, sometimes even ingesting parts of victims or the accused, sometimes even ingesting parts of the victims or the suspects to learn more about the case and help solve it. He initially worked for the Philadelphia Police Department, but ultimately gets fired after they witness him eating part of a deceased suspect. He later is hired by the FDA. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, there are actually a lot more indie superheroes that I would love to tell you about as we dive into the world of unknown supers. So if you want to learn more, be sure to let us know by commenting below and giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Red Sonja. One of my favorite lesser known heroes is Red Sonja. Red Sonja comes to us from the less sci-fi, more fantasy based world of sword and sorcery. She is an extremely gifted fighter, marksman, and sword bearer. Red Sonja, the she-devil, is said to have been given her name for, well, many different reasons. One such story as to how she got her name is that she left to seek out adventure and her fortune and became a mercenary, earning the name Red because of all the blood that she spilled. Red Sonja, while not a traditional hero, pretty much always stands up to those who are cruel and corrupt, often fighting for those who are oppressed, even against her better judgment. She has even fought death before in combat and won, allowing her to live on when she was on the brink of death. Red Sonja was once a character from the Marvel Comics wheelhouse, but currently calls Dynamite Comics her home. Number 7. Vampirella, but you can call her Vampy. Vampirella isn't a conventional hero by any means, but she definitely tries to do what's best by folks while still being a vampire from outer space, and at the same time with ties to Lilith and Hell. Overall, she's both complicated and also kinda super simple, and it's that weird blend of those two very different elements that I love about her. Vampy, being an intergalactic vampire, is super strong, fast, can fly because she actually has wings, and also has been shown to have access to advanced technology at times due to her ties to the planet Draculon. Vampirella is currently attached to Dynamite Comics, but was originally a property of Warren Publishing. Number 6. Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is a popular hero as far as the lesser known or indie heroes go, so if you haven't heard of him before, you might want to check him out. Initially, his origins were a mystery. All we knew was that he was a humanoid, green-skinned, dragon-like character who decided to fight as a police officer and hero, fighting against the criminal and mutant super freaks of Chicago. That's also in part because Savage Dragon initially had really bad amnesia in the comics, so he didn't actually even remember his own origin story at the time. Savage Dragon hails from Image Comics and was originally introduced as simply Dragon before being known under the mantle of Savage Dragon. His powers include super strength and super healing. Number 5. Witchblade. Witchblade is a hero who comes from Top Cow Productions. Mainly we've known Witchblade as Sarah Pizzini, but the Witchblade has belonged to many other powerful women throughout the years. The Witchblade is an ancient mystical artifact that typically binds itself to a host who can then wield and use its powers at will. It can be more or less powerful depending on the host, but in this case, since Sarah is one of the most well-known hosts of the Witchblade, we're gonna basically base the ranking on her abilities. The Witchblade can be used to summon mystical armor, which can cover the entirety of its host's body, though typically most are not skilled enough to actually summon that much armor, and instead are usually only covered in little pieces of armor as a result. Hence why you see that Witchblade art and she's like, not really covered in much. This armor grants the wearer invulnerability, but even if its host is harmed, it also grants the power to heal. Aside from creating armor, the Witchblade can also be used to create weapons on the fly. It also increases its host's strength and endurance. Sarah herself was also a trained NYPD detective prior to becoming the host for the Witchblade, so she also brings her skills as an officer and detective to the table. Number 4. Luther Strode. Luther Strode is the main character in the Strange Talent of Luther Strode series, a series that hails from Image Comics. Luther ends up acquiring powers that enhance his strength, durability, speed, and combat skills after receiving a mail-order exercise program known as the Hercules Method. Luther's powers, however, only create more harm than good in his life and lead to a lot of death, much of it happening as a result of his own involvement. Try as he might to try and do good with it. While not a conventional hero, Luther definitely fits the bill of an anti-hero, or more accurately tragic hero archetype, with everything going awry no matter his intent. He's also someone I would personally love to see take on the hero who made our number 2 spot. Number 3. Radiant Black. Radiant Black is Nathan Burnett, or was Nathan Burnett. Nathan to start, anyways. Going to try not to spoil this series because it's one that I think we should all be reading, so I'm just gonna leave it at Nathan for now. Radiant Black is the first hero we meet in this series. In issue number 1, Nathan ends up getting the powers of the Black Radiant, which basically means he has the powers of a black hole. Radiant Black can manipulate gravity and also becomes super dense with this power set. The downside for this hero is being new means that he's pretty inexperienced in the comics thus far. However, gravity manipulation as a power set is insane, which is how he ranks so high up on this list despite his inexperience. Radiant Black hails from Image Comics, and like I said, if you have not checked out this series and gotten to know the Radiants yet, well, you definitely need to change that, and you need to do so. It's like Power Rangers, but possibly cooler, and I say that having much respect and much love for Power Rangers. So that's not a snub at all, it's just like, it's really good. Number 2. Bulletproof. You know Invincible, but do you know Bulletproof? Fans of the comic series likely do, but if you just became an Invincible fan via the animated series, then this isn't a character that you'd be familiar with just yet. After all, at this point we've only had one season so far, so it's very likely Bulletproof will appear in the series, just not until a bit later on. Bulletproof is Xandale Rudolph. He got his powers as a result of his brother using him as basically a science experiment, as his brother Tyrone was actually obsessed with superpowers. Xandale would end up getting powers as a result of this mad science, while his brother would end up dead. Bulletproof also goes on to take up the Invincible mantle at one point, filling in for Mark when he is off-world. Xandale's powers are based on energy absorption, which I think is one of the strongest power sets to have personally. Bulletproof, like other heroes in the Invincible universe, comes to us from Skybound, which is an imprint of Image Comics. Number 1. The Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient elemental force that takes up residence in a host, granting them special powers. One of the most famous hosts that we have come to know as the Darkness is Jackie Estacado. The powers that Jackie wields are similar to what you'd expect from some kind of demonic force. They're also honestly comparable to Venom's power set from Marvel Comics, at least I see a lot of similarities there. The Darkness gives you access to a sort of mystical armor which can be summoned at will. It also grants the user a healing factor, shapeshift abilities, and through them also the ability to fly via wings that you can create. Jackie as the Darkness can also create dark tendrils, which he can also turn into weapons, and he can also summon entities known as Darklings. While more of an anti-hero due to his methods, Jackie Estacado is still a hero in the sense that he generally fights on the side of good. The Darkness hails from Top Cow Productions. And if you do know the Witchblade, you probably know the Darkness, or vice versa. Number 10. Wind. Wind is the name of the main character from the self-titled series, also of course named Wind. It comes from Boom Studios and was written by James Tynion IV with art by Michael Dalianos. Wind is a teenage hero who has always hidden the truth of his elven and magical heritage as a weird blood. His heritage grants him great power he's been hiding from his whole life in an attempt to fit in, being made to believe that magic is dangerous and basically turns people into monsters, or in some other way corrupts them. When he becomes too old to hide his pointed ears and who he is any longer, he is forced to either try and change or embrace who he really is. And in order to protect his friends against those who would hunt both him and them down, Wind ultimately embraces his magical side, unleashing powerful abilities. Wind has wings, can fly, and can communicate with forest-like spirits or sprites. He also has, like many other teen heroes, the power of friendship, which usually means he ends up making friends with powerful allies. I would say if you love the world of Avatar, you might also end up falling in love with both the character Wind and his series. It reminds me of Avatar, at least, in like the best way. Number 9. Lord Fanny. Lord Fanny is Hilda Morales, who was born as a boy but raised as a girl. She's a transsexual woman and one of the first trans heroes in comics. Lord Fanny was raised as a girl by her grandmother because only women in their culture could become witches, and her grandmother was a powerful witch who wanted to pass on her knowledge and power to Fanny, although Fanny herself did choose to be a girl, if that makes sense. Lord Fanny is a member of the Invisibles team and was created by writer Grant Morrison and artist Steve Yoel. The Invisibles was a comic series that existed as part of DC's Vertigo imprint back when it was around. I miss Vertigo so much. The series began in 1994, and in issue 13 we'd learn more about Lord Fanny's origins and her very tragic backstory. Lord Fanny's such a cool character. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more cool, lesser known indie heroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Quantum and Woody. You may have heard of Valiant's character Bloodshot, who recently got his own solo film, but what about all of their other superheroes? Quantum and Woody is a series and superhero duo from Valiant Comics. It was inspired by the superhero team-up series Power Man and Iron Fist, but is a lot more bizarre. The series itself was written by Christopher Priest, with art actually by the artist who did Power Man and Iron Fist. Pretty cool. Quantum and Woody are adoptive brothers who, after years of being estranged, are brought back together when their father mysteriously dies. While trying to figure out what really happened to him, they stumble upon superpowers. The catch? They must touch their power bands at least once every 24 hours to not only keep their powers, but also keep from losing their lives as well, as they would then no longer exist if they didn't touch their band. Quantum's powers are more defense-based, while Woody's are more offensive. Oh, and they also kind of have an animal sidekick, Vincent Van Gogh, who is even more bizarre than he already sounds. Just trust me. I don't want to spoil anything, but Vincent Van Gogh. What a goat. Number 7. Josephine. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series. Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series, which comes to us from Image Comics. Fatale is a supernatural noir-style comic created by the brilliant team-up of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. Seriously, I love these two together. Some might argue that Jo isn't really a hero as she's a little bit selfish, but in focusing on uncovering the mysteries of her own power and in trying to save herself, she does inevitably save others. In the long run, at least. There are a lot of people that end up being sacrificed along the way in order for Jo to stand a chance in defeating her enemies in the end. And also there are just straight up people being sacrificed along the way by her enemies who are attempting to track her down. So yeah, she kinda also gets a lot of people killed, but you know, it's not her fault. Jo's powers allow her to control all men who gaze upon her, with them being irresistibly attracted to her no matter who they are and no matter if she wants to influence them or not. Unless of course they are able to protect themselves against her influence with extremely powerful magic, which we only see from a couple characters really in the series. In other words, her power is pretty freaking strong. The only downside here, which is kind of the crux of it all, is that she can't fully control her powers. That is, she can't turn them off when she wants to, which ends up causing a lot of problems for Jo along the way, but I won't spoil any of that. Anyways, if you haven't read Fatale, it's now, I think, it's gonna be 10 years old soon, so go and read it, hurry up! Came out I think in 2012. That's when it started. Number 6. King Mob. King Mob is the leader of the Invisibles. He was once a horror writer who wrote under the pen name Kit Morrison. As the series The Invisibles is created by Grant Morrison, Mob is believed to be sort of a fictional stand-in for Morrison himself. King Mob's legal name was Gideon Starozowski, and he struggles with his alter persona, especially troubled by how violent he, as King Mob, can be. King Mob is not only a leader who wields power in that sense, because he's a leader, but also has experience with firearms and weapons, is a skilled martial artist and fighter, is psychic, can time travel, and employs the use of chaos magic. So lots of cool things that he can do. Also, if you haven't read The Invisibles, it is really trippy. Go read it. If you like The Matrix, you'll probably like The Invisibles. If you like The Matrix and if you like Doom Patrol, which of course is also Grant Morrison. Not The Matrix, Doom Patrol. Number 5. Laura Wilson / Persephone. Laura Wilson is the main character of the Wicked and the Divine series from Image Comics. The series was created by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey. In this story, gods come to life cyclically, being kinda reincarnated. This is known as the recurrence. Laura herself is obsessed with the gods and the pantheon, who are all of course re-emerging at the time. She wants nothing more than to be a god herself. At least that is what she thinks she wants, until her wishes kind of come true. She is revealed to be Persephone, who is believed to be the final god to return during the recurrence. As Persephone, she can summon plants and vines and control them. She also seems to have some kind of control or influence over the underworld. Laura can also create fireballs and reveal to others past events, summoning visions of the past even if she was not present for those events. Number 4. Sludge. Sludge is a hero or anti-hero who comes to us initially from Malibu Comics and was created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Aaron Lopresti. Sludge was once Frank Hogue, a dirty NYPD police officer who accepted bribes in exchange for favors when it came to drug dealings. He was ordered by the crime boss he worked for, John Paul Marcello, to kill another likely dirtier cop. When Frank refused Marcello's request, Marcello had him killed instead. After being shot, a grenade went off, knocking him into a bucket of chemical waste. Who put that chemical waste there? The waste would merge with him after he was dumped into the sewers, turning him into the super heroic monstrosity Sludge. Sludge possesses a healing factor and super strength. He could also kill or mutate his opponents with just a touch. Kinda turns them into sludge. It's pretty dark, really. Number 3. Radiant Yellow. We don't know that much about the newest Radiants, but we do know that they seem interested in protecting innocent people from whatever craziness is currently going on. Okay, hard to keep talking about all of this Radiant Black series without spoiling anything, but once again, I'm gonna try my best. Radiant Yellow appears to be an older gentleman, and as far as I know, we don't really know his name yet. What we do know is that each Radiant seems to have their own power set. At least that's what we're being led to believe by the story and the imagery used. confused. It hasn't exactly all been laid out yet, which is honestly kind of what makes this series so much fun. There's so much we don't know. The mystery of it all. Radiant Yellow, however, seems to have powers based in perhaps light manipulation. To me, that's what it looks like the force blasts that they emit are based in, and it also looks to me like they can perhaps manipulate light to create illusions. That's just based on the imagery that's surrounding them in the comics. Like the other Radiants, Yellow isn't too experienced and doesn't seem to understand the full extent of their powers just yet. Radiant Yellow comes to us from the Radiant Black series, which belongs to Image Comics and is written by Kyle Higgins, who, yes, was also the initial writer of the Power Rangers series, and it was also created by artist Marcelo Costa. Number 2. Exo Manowar. Valiant Comics actually has a whole stable and universe filled with supers, including this one here, Exo Manowar. Exo Manowar is actually the name of the sentient armor that is tied to our hero in this series, Auric of Dacia, a Visigoth from the 5th century AD. Auric would end up being abducted by aliens and enslaved for years before he managed to escape. Auric learned of where his captive's armory was kept and basically ended up getting there and then getting the Exo Manowar suit. He then bonded with the suit and used that advanced tech to escape his captors. However, due to interstellar travel, by the time he arrived back on Earth, it was now the 20th century, basically modern day. Eric would have to adjust to this very different world, and along the way would meet other superheroes from the Valiant universe. That's right, there's not just 2 more, there's a whole bunch of them. Exo Manowar is a character created by writers Jim Shooter, Steve Englehart, and as well as artists Bob Layton and Barry Windsor-Smith. Number 1. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is Joe Weber, the title character of the Black Hammer series, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by the amazing Dean Ormston. The Black Hammer series was made to be completely different from other more traditional superhero comics, but if I did have to compare Black Hammer to anyone from that more conventional world, I would liken him to Thor myself. Joe Weber inherited the hammer and powers of the former Black Hammer when he died, being transported to the realm of New World as soon as he himself had picked up the fallen hammer. There he learned that he was meant to become the new Black Hammer, replacing the fallen one as Starlock's new and most powerful warrior in the fight against Starlock's evil twin, the Anti-God. While being the title character, Black Hammer isn't actually the main character of this series. As we learn near the end of issue number 1, Black Hammer sacrificed himself to save the world from the Anti-God and keep his fellow superheroes and friends alive. But what really happened to him, and just how and why are his teammates now seemingly trapped in the timeless and kinda eerie town of Rockwood? Well, to find out, you'll have to read on, true believers. But honestly, you should just go read Black Hammer because it's pretty great. Everyone go read all the Black Hammer things. It's like a whole universe now.
In at 10, Tony Stark. Wilson Fisk's men attempted to kill Anthony Stark in order to silence his drunken singing, forcing Sheriff Rogers to intervene and save his life. Tony Stark later donned the suit of battle armor to save the life of Red Wolf. However, this suit looks more like a train than a battle mech suit, and in all honesty, it's the perfect combination of these two things. First appearing in 1872 number 1 from 2015, this version of the Iron Man armor is one that I want to see someone cosplay because holy damn, this look is based off the original Iron Man suit, and like, you know, the one Tony Stark built in a cave with a pile of scraps. Yeah, it's that one, but make it dark steampunk basically. But by steampunk I also mean steam engine. Well, combustion engine. I don't know much about trains. You know the train that Marty and Doc used to get the DeLorean up to 85 and then back to 1985 and Back to the Future Part 3? Yeah, that, but an Iron Man suit. I feel like the Tony from 1972 was the one who made that train fly and time travel. I feel like he was the one that Doc went to. In a 9, Gazer Beam. Simon J. Palladino, also known as Gazer Beam, is a minor character in The Incredibles. He only briefly appears in the film alive, but his disappearance and death really is what sets the events of the movie into motion. Gazer Beam was a member of the superhero team known as the Phantasmics, but conflicts with Everseer led him to leave the team, and he soon joined with the Thrilling Three as their new leader upon the death of Dynaguy, which he also later left. He appeared alive at the wedding of Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible, but during the superhero ban, Gazer Beam was an activist for superhuman rights, wanting the ban on supers to be revoked. 15 years later, he would be one of the most recent victims of the Omnidroid, with Bob having noticed his disappearance becoming a story in the newspaper. His final act before dying though was to use his powers to carve Kronos on the cave wall in which he was hiding, in the hopes that someone would discover it and put an end to Syndrome's evil schemes. An act that was really what made the Incredibles Incredibles able to stop Syndrome's scheme and save the day, since without it Bob wouldn't really have learned what the mission was. And yes, I used a character from The Incredibles on this list because he was a superhero in the past. Deal with it. And at 8, Stardust the Super Wizard. However, this is a case of a superhero forgotten in the past, so another use for the term from the past. Stardust the Super Wizard is a fictional superhero from the golden age of comics who originally appeared in American comic books published by Fox Feature Syndicate, and first appeared in Fantastic Comics #1 in 1939. Stardust the Super Wizard was featured in 16 issues of Fantastic Comics, and this was before superheroes were really trying to be better than criminals, as Stardust would basically kill all of his enemies in various ways with his wide array of powers. And when I say wide array of powers, I mean it. This guy has about as many powers as a Lantern Corps, if not more. Superhuman strength, speed, durability, and endurance, vast knowledge of interplanetary science, master of space and planetary forces, skilled detective, formidable brawler, accelerated perception, extrasensory perception, augmented respiration, interplanetary flight, indestructibility, telepathy, transportation, metamorphosis, transmogrification, telekinesis, selective omniscience, which is awesome. And luminous skywriting. And then throw on whatever other powers he needs to have thanks to the story because he's a freaking wizard and it's 1939. This, with the combination of just offing people he didn't like, makes him absolutely nuts. But I love it. And at 7, Dark Knights of Steel. Coming in November of this year, Dark Knights of Steel will basically be DC meets Game of Thrones. The series is written by Tom Taylor and takes place in a medieval fantasy world, where a spaceship crash lands from a doomed planet. So not only will the Dark Knight be here, but so will Superman and Wonder Woman, along with Harley Quinn, Black Lightning, and more. Tom Taylor told Entertainment Weekly, quote, "I've spent the last 2 years creating a new epic fantasy universe for DC Comics, and Dark Knights of Steel is an absolute dream come true. Despite being the writer of the DC horror series Deceased, I am actually a huge fantasy fan, combining two of my favorite things, DC superheroes and high fantasy. It's my absolute happy place, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. I love medieval stuff. It's why I love Skyrim and Game of Thrones, and why my name is the Cheese King. I love fantasy stories, and I can't wait to sink my teeth into this one, especially when in the preview we got for this series, we can see what is in essence a character sheet base, or like character stats for Superman. So if they include one of these with every issue, you can have a real DC based fantasy Dungeons and Dragons game with like official stats. And that sounds f***ing awesome. Who do you hope shows up in this series? I'm hoping to see the Flash, but like medieval, but like, hey, you let me know your thoughts down below. And at 6, Agron Bat. Agron Bat is a Japanese superhero created by Suzuki Ichiro and Takeo Nagamatsu in 1931, who originally debuted in a kamishibai, which is a paper theater. Agron Bat is considered by some to be the world's first superhero, and is a precursor to later superhero characters such as the Japanese Prince of Gamma, as well as well-known comic book characters like Superman and Batman. Agron Bat was created by 16-year-old Takeo Nagamatsu and 25-year-old Suzuki Ichiro in 1931. And the two were inspired by drawings of mythological characters in Tokyo's Unio Royale Museum to create a new hero based on science rather than mythology. Agron Bat is a being from ancient Atlantis who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to battle evil forces threatening the present day. He has a golden skull-shaped head, wears a green and white swashbuckler outfit with a high-collared red cape, and carries a rapier. His superpowers include superhuman strength, invulnerability, and the ability to fly. Plus, I mean, he was sent 10,000 years in the future, so if that's not the past, then I don't know what is. Halfway through into number 5, Danny Phantom. Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14 when his parents built a very strange machine. It was designed to view a world unseen, that realm being the ghost dimension aptly named the Ghost Zone. When it didn't quite work, his folks, they just quit. Then Danny took a look inside of it. There was a great big flash and everything just changed. His molecules got all rearranged. And then this 14-year-old kid gained the ability to transform into a human or into a ghost. Danny Phantom is one of my all-time favorite cartoons, and it helped to shape me into who I am today. So of course I'm going to include it as a superhero from the past because he's from my past, okay? That's right, I found a way to work it in. While in his ghost form, Danny has multiple abilities, including flight, invisibility, intangibility, and to possess people at first. However, as the series goes on, he gains more abilities, such as ghost rays, which are bolts of energies from his hands, cryokinesis, and his ghostly wail, which he learns sooner than he's supposed to, thanks to a version of himself from the future, who he ends up fighting in the two-part hour-long episode titled Ultimate Enemy, in which present Danny gets dragged to the future, where he's turned evil, thanks to combining with his primary adversary and uncle, Vlad Plasmius. So he also got dragged into the future, thus meaning that he was from the past. Boom! You looking for this? In it for Phantom Rider. Carter Slade was born and raised in Ohio in the mid-19th century, along with his brother Lincoln. Eventually, Carter decided to move out west to the new territories in order to become a school teacher at a new settlement in Montana. However, he came across a group of people slaughtering helpless homesteaders. Though he fought bravely, Carter was eventually defeated, shot multiple times, and slowly dying from his injuries. He was brought to a native medicine man called Flaming Star, who had many years before seen a shooting star that brought with it a special dust. Flaming Star took this as a sign that a champion would one day be sent to them to fight injustice. He believed that Carter was this champion and gave him most of his costume, along with the dust, which Carter used to make the rest of it and tame a white horse he called Banshee. However, Carter would eventually die while trying to save his brother Lincoln from a cave-in, which results in Lincoln taking over the mantle of Phantom Rider. Basically, it's Ghost Rider from the Old West. And I think it's without the demon. Getting close to the end in number 3, Captain America. After being a kid from Brooklyn who just wanted to help, Steve Rogers volunteered for an experimental procedure to make super soldiers to aid the Americas during World War II. However, after the experiment was successful, the rest of the equipment was destroyed along with the genius behind it. However, after falling from an experimental drone plane into the North Atlantic Ocean, he spent decades frozen in a block of ice in a state of suspended animation. Quite literally being a superhero from the past, even in real world standards, since this was also his reintroduction into the Marvel Comics Silver and Bronze Age. I think we all know this story at this point thanks to the absolute success of the MCU, but it's still easy to forget that Cap was originally from the 40s until comic books were on the rise again in the 60s, which is really interesting because, like, in the most literal sense of the word, Captain America is a hero from the past, and is probably the most fitting character for this list for that reason, but there are a couple more that I wanted to talk about, so I put him at number 3. Penultimately, in at number 2, Black Knight. Marvel Comics' first Black Knight, Sir Percy of Scandia, first appeared in the medieval adventure series Black Knight numbers 1 to 5 from Atlantic Comics, the 1950s precursor to Marvel Comics, and this ran in 1955. The original Black Knight is Sir Percy of Scandia, a 6th century knight who serves at the court of King Arthur as his greatest warrior and one of the Knights of the Round Table. While the modern Black Knight seems to be making an appearance in the Eternals, the original Black Knight was recruited by the wizard Merlin and adopts a double identity. He pretends to be totally incompetent until changing into the persona of the Black Knight. As the Black Knight, Percy wields the Ebony Blade, which Merlin forged himself from a meteorite. The modern version, known as Dan Whitman, is the original Black Knight's descendant and the supervillain Black Knight's nephew. He inherited the mystical Ebony Blade that carried a curse and took the Black Knight mantle to help restore honor to it. And I gotta say, it's a really weird family dynamic that you got going on. This family reunions must be really awkward. Finally, in at number 1, Paul Manning. In the year 5700, we see a hero known as Paul Manning, who would appear whenever the world was in danger. However, it was revealed that this Paul Manning was in fact the Green Lantern known as Hal Jordan, who would be brought to the year 5700 by the Solarians. They would also wipe his mind and clear his memories to implant him with new ones, which is where Paul Manning came from. It was a created identity by the Solarians to get Hal to save them whenever they were having issues, or maybe if a really important cat was stuck in a tree. Eventually though, after being brought to the future many times, Hal ended up subconsciously creating an evil doppelganger of himself who took over the Paul Manning identity, and went on to terrorize the Solarians. He would then be defeated by actual Hal and would be converted into a functioning member of society. However, this was also all pre-Crisis, and after the collapse of the multiverse this no longer applies to the main continuity version of Manning. But it's still pretty interesting nonetheless. Like, imagine being pulled into the future and not even knowing it. By that logic, any of us could be from any point in the past, and we just wouldn't know. And at 10, Cassandra Kane. Cassandra Kane is the 4th Batgirl. Born with the assassin David Kane and Lady Shiva as her parents, she was trained to become the perfect warrior. Her father deprived her of speech so that she would learn movement and physicality as her first language. Batman adopted her into the Batman family during No Man's Land to replace Helena Bertinelli as Batgirl. Cassandra would eventually turn her Batgirl costume over to Stephanie Brown and become a member of Batman Incorporated as Black Bat. Trained by her father to be the ultimate weapon, Cassandra was not taught to speak. Instead, her father relied mostly on actions to communicate with her. He also cut her off from the outside world, only exposing her to anything or anyone other than him when absolutely necessary. As a result, the parts of her brain normally used for speech and language processing were trained so that she could read other people's movements and body language to recognize their thoughts without verbal communication, and predict with uncanny accuracy their next move in a fight. This also caused her brain to develop learning functions different from most, so it's like a form of dyslexia that hampers her ability to talk, read, and write. And at 9, Beast Boy. Beast Boy's parents, Mark and Mary Logan, were geneticists that would travel the jungles of the world to study their wildlife. Beast Boy was brought up in the jungles of Brazil, Africa, India, and several other places. The Logans became particularly interested in a rare species of green monkey, which honestly I understand. But the day they finally found them, something terrible happened. Beast Boy was bitten by one of these monkeys and contracted a serious illness called cicudia. To save him, his parents attempted to cure him with a new serum, which bestowed him with his iconic shape-changing abilities, and as a side effect, his skin, hair, and eyes all turned green. Beast Boy was originally the youngest member of Doom Patrol, however revealed in Homecoming, Mentos' harsh discipline and less than encouraging attitude finally alienated him from his surrogate family, and he stuck out on his own. Looking for a new place to live, he came to Jump City where he encountered Robin, Starfire, Raven, and Cyborg. Afterwards, the 5 formed a new team of their own, the Teen Titans. And at 8, Aqualad. Operating as Aqualad by his king's side as the first leader of the Teen Titans, he briefly worked under deep cover as the loyal lieutenant of his father, Black Manta, to bring down the Light and their partner. Eventually, King Orin retired his heroic duties and Calder took over the mantle of Aquaman, joined the Justice League, and became their leader by July of 2018. In February 2019, he officially stepped down as their leader, and Aqualad eagerly expected to become a member of the Justice League alongside Speedy, Robin, and Kid Flash. However, when it became clear that that wasn't happening, he decided to accompany Robin and Kid Flash to investigate Cadmus Labs. There they found the Genomorph Project and Superboy, whom they liberated. Aqualad, Kid Flash, and Robin set off on an unsanctioned mission to protect CEO Selena Gonzalez from the League of Shadows, but despite their best efforts, Gonzalez still vanished. And at 7, Miss Martian. When she first came to Earth, Miss Martian was a bubbly, exceptionally sweet, polite, and caring individual, although occasionally shy young Martian girl who longed to fit in on Earth and become a member of a team. However, being from Mars and having never really interacted with humans before, she was frequently unfamiliar with Earth's customs. She felt especially uncomfortable with her telepathy, as on Mars it's the prime form of communication, but on Earth it's not really a thing. But she was also quite inexperienced, but eager to please. By 2016, she had become considerably more serious, but still retained her caring side. She's become more experienced and adept at using her powers, and isn't afraid to use extreme measures to exact information. As a shapeshifter, she can model her appearance to her desire, which is usually that of a green-skinned female humanoid based on Mary Logan as a teenager, with amber eyes and shoulder-length red hair. Though after 5 years she now keeps her hair shorter at length, but it still grows longer over the months, which she must be doing consciously, because she's a shapeshifter. It's because the hair won't naturally grow if you're just like pretending it exists. So she has to be consciously slowly growing her hair, which is interesting to me. And at 6, Tara Markov. Also known as Tara, had manifested the ability to manipulate Earth. She can levitate Earth, manipulate its shape and configuration, like raising the floor to make a shield, or alter its state, like turn hard Earth into a substance similar to quicksand. So basically she's the DC version of an Earthbender. Tara was a child when her powers emerged. Markov's parents freaked out though and thought that she was possessed by evil. She was abandoned and forced to live in the streets eating out of dumpsters. So Deathstroke was contracted by Brother Blood, leader of Hive, and the Church of Blood. He eventually wanted Deathstroke to capture all of the Teen Titans for him. Deathstroke heard of Tara Markov and her powers, and he devised a plan to use her as a spy and, if needed, a bargaining chip. He also went to Markovia and intervened in an attempted public execution. Tara was tied up to a vehicle and dragged around while the mob chanted for her death. calling her a witch and a demon. Deathstroke sliced the head off the man who was holding a gun to tear his head, and she was later taken in as the latest member of the Teen Titans team. Halfway through in at number 5, Wonder Girl. Cassie Sandsmark was the second person to be called Wonder Girl, the first being Donna Troy. Cassie was the daughter of Dr. Helena Sandsmark and the Greek god Zeus. She spent most of her time at her mother's place of work, the Gateway City Museum of Antiquities, where she had a penchant for getting into trouble. She quickly befriended her mother's new employee, though, Wonder Woman, and was eager to help her. During a fight with a Doomsday clone and another battle with Decay, she created a costume and used magical acquirements, the Sandals of Hermes and the Gauntlet of Atlas to be exact, to help Wonder Woman, much to her mother's horror. Cassie later had the opportunity to ask Zeus for a boon and requested real superpowers. Zeus granted her request but gave Dr. Sandsmark the ability to deactivate them. Dr. Sandsmark, however, reluctantly accepted her daughter's wish to be a superhero and rarely, if ever, used this ability, and Artemis was assigned to be her teacher. Zeus giving her mom the ability to turn off those powers, though, is actually probably the most sensible thing someone has ever done in the DC universe, straight up. Like, good on you, Zeus, bro. This is like the most sensible version of Zeus I think I've seen, at least in this instance. And in 4, Damien Wayne. Sometime after Batman became a public hero, he fought Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins. During his adventure, he met Raz's daughter, Talia al Ghul. The two young adults fell for each other and, after a brief fling, they conceived a child. Bruce was unaware of the child's conception though and returned to crime fighting for years. Talia, on the other hand, taking advantage of the hero's impressive genes, believed their child to be the perfect heir, and the child was born and given the name Damien. Talia then used the League's extensive scientific resources to inorganically speed up the child's aging, giving him the physiology of a 10-year-old in less than 5 years, which was also used as a plot device to make sense as to why he would be meeting his father. Eventually though, when Talia deemed that Damien was ready, she allowed him to go to Gotham and meet his father, the Batman. Batman was surprised to learn that he had a secret son with a supervillain, but sought to learn more about the boy anyway. Despite his intense training to become a remorseless assassin, Damien was sympathetic to his father's vigilanteism in Gotham and volunteered to become his next sidekick. Batman agreed and granted Damien the mantle of Robin, his 4th ward to use the name, which should already kind of indicate the path that this thing kind of takes there, Damien, so maybe not serve yourself up as a human sacrifice for character building purposes next time. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Kid Flash. Bartholomew Bart Allen is a speedster from the year 2056 and the grandson of Barry Allen. When he came to the past, he joined the team under the name Impulse, and after Wally West's death, he took on the mantle of Kid Flash. He later joined the Outsiders. But given the dire situation that his time is in, Bart is serious and slightly jaded, who was greatly appreciative of his extended family in the past. Whether accidental or intentional, Bart constantly spoils information for people about the future, such as revealing Robin and Nightwing's identities to Beast Boy, and that Iris West Allen was carrying twins. This was also adapted into the CW show The Flash, where Bart and Nora are actually Barry's kids instead of grandkids, and they take on the name of the Tornado Twins over Dawn and Dawn, since they don't exist. I guess Flash writers thought that was a little too much. Penultimately, in at number 2, Raven. Raven, also known as Rachel Roth, is a superhero with magical abilities and a prominent member of the Teen Titans. Raven is a tele-empathetic, and she can teleport, send out her soul self, which can fight, like physically, manifest as a force field, manipulate objects and others as like with telekinesis, and it can also act as Raven's eyes and ears away from her body. Raven was born the half-breed daughter of a human mother named Angela Roth and the demon overlord Emperor Trigon. Eventually, she learned that Trigon was planning to come to her dimension and vowed to stop him. She initially approached the Justice League, which they refused on the advice of Zatanna, who sensed her demonic parentage. In desperation, she reformed the Titans as the new Teen Titans to fight against her father. The team was eventually able to defeat Trigon and seal him in an interdimensional prison. However, Raven still had to fight her father's influence because he wasn't actually completely destroyed, so she was still part demon. Yeah. And finally, in at number 1, Superboy. Superboy, aka Con-El or Connor Kent, yeah, you know why I mentioned that, was a genomorph, a binary clone of Superman and Lex Luthor, and a founding member of the Young Justice team. On February 25th, 2019, Superboy had revealed himself to the world and left the team in order to become a member of the Outsiders. After he became engaged to Miss Martian, the couple traveled to Mars to prepare for their upcoming wedding, but he historically sacrificed himself to protect the Martians from a gene bomb. Before this though, Aqualad, Robin, and Kid Flash Flash discovered the Genomorph Project and Superboy, whom they liberated. The four youths stood up to their mentors and declared that they were ready to prove themselves as heroes. While Batman considered their argument, Kid Flash and Superboy stayed with him. Together they faced the Terror Twins at the Central City Mall, and they formed a covert ops team where they were given their own headquarters in Mount Justice. And they were introduced to Miss Martian, which would ultimately lead to Superboy's death. So, sorry bro.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Genie. We'll start with one that seems to cause some continuity clashes, but it's plenty entertaining anyway. Throughout the 2099 universe, we meet descendants and followers of heroes that made Marvel so famous. Great-grandchildren of classic heroes are all about, and oftentimes the original supers have died, disappeared, or become decrepit to fight crime. New folks come around to replace the old folks. It's the way of the world. However, in many Marvel stories, Doctor Strange manages to outlive all sorts of folks thanks to his magical abilities. This is not the case in 2099 though, as he's nowhere to be found. In his place is another person who goes by the name Strange, and this time it's a woman. Also known as Genie, or possibly Sorceress Supreme, this magical mistress realized she had magical abilities and worked to perfect them on her own. Idolizing her older brother, she followed him one day and witnessed him being attacked by Skrulls. Attempting to scare them away, she tried to conjure an illusion of a Lovecraftian monster and ended up actually summoning an eldritch monstrosity. This didn't end up well for anyone, as she ended up accidentally killing her brother. Whoops. From there on, she underwent more training and started helping other heroes in various capacities. With all sorts of powers fueled by the mystic arts, she can do a whole lot of wicked things. From healing injuries to teleportation to casting sleep spells, she's got it all under control. Plus, she is immune to timeline distortions, which proves to be helpful quite often. So don't mess with Mademoiselle Strange. Coming in at number 9, Deadpool. Wade Wilson who? Well, actually it seems that Wade is indeed still around, but in 2099 his daughter Warda has taken up the mantle, and she seems to enjoy torturing him, which is interesting. Add in a mother who was once queen of the undead and you've got one hell of a mix of powers. She has Wade's regenerative powers as well as some possible vampirism from her mother's side. Absolutely wild. To make her potentially even more effective, she doesn't seem to share her father's sense of humor. Less goofing around, less cracking wise, and more violence. The weapon proficiency is still there too. Nice. Warda spends most of her time attempting to figure out where her mother is and eventually finds her true family, so good for her. Coming in at number 8, Moon Knight. Let's go, Moon Knight. In 2099, they're actually on the moon, and she's no longer Mark Spector, but an unknown individual with a totally secret identity. How cool is that? Wielding a bevy of powerful gadgets and weapons, Moon Knight acts as the server of vigilante justice on the moon-based city of Adelan. Stalking the Night, or whatever version of Night is on the moon, she keeps the many Inhumans who call that place home as safe as she can. After accidentally wandering into the forbidden citadel of the Watcher, she convinces Uatu to let the Fantastic Four constructs to stick around longer until they've lived up to their former lives. Good on you, Moon Knight. Coming in at number 7, we've got Ghost Rider. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed that Nick Cage isn't the Ghost Rider in 2099. This implies that Hollywood's most controversial leading man doesn't make it until then, and that's just a shame. Thankfully, Ghost Rider is still wicked cool in the future and comes packing some new weapons and powers. Gone are the days that Ghost Rider is a literal magical skeleton flying around on his flaming motorcycle. In 2099, Vengeance got an update. Kenshiro Zero Cochran, computer hacker extraordinaire, ends up with his mind inside of an insanely powerful robot body. A Cybertech 101 warbot to be exact. And this robot is jam-packed with all sorts of futuristic weaponry, from eye lasers, to a hand that can transform into a whole bunch of weapons, to a retractable chainsaw embedded in his arm. Oh, and also a 50 caliber gun and grenades. Still a weapon for vengeance though, Ghost Rider manages to project the image of a flaming skull, just like the OG, using his holographic capabilities. Now that's how you future-proof your superhero. Coming in at number 6, Hulk. Our futuristic gamma-fueled beast is definitely a contender for strongest ever. However, unlike the original Hulk, he's not quite immortal. I won't get into the nitty-gritty here, but even a base power higher than the first Green Giant isn't enough to keep you alive against all odds. Too bad too, because this is a really cool reimagining of a classic hero. In 2099, a movie producer named John Eisenhart decides he wants to do a movie about the Knights of Banner. This group worships Bruce Banner like a god and tends to move around all over the place. When Eisenhart finds out he can't get the rights to their story, he turns them into the police, but feels guilty afterwards. He tries to find a way to help them out, but gets caught in the blast of a gamma bomb, turning him into a brand new green monstrosity. He's got more base strength than the original Hulk, sharp teeth and claws useful for ripping and tearing, and even holds onto his human intelligence once transformed. Able to lift up to 150 tons and leap hundreds of feet in a single bound, this version of the Hulk is a force to be reckoned with. Coming in at number 5, we've got Thor. This might come as a bit of a surprise, but in the future, a lot of people worship superheroes, and a lot of the time, those who revere these supernatural figures are interested in attaining these godly powers for themselves. In 2099, a subset of people have decided to give themselves to Thor, mind, body, and spirit. Known as members of the Church of Thor, or Thorites, they all have the hallmarks of many other major religions, down to the places of worship and religious leaders. Cecil McAdams was a reverend of the Church of Thor, and was actually chosen to take up the mantle of the Norse god of thunder himself. Through technological advances and a whole lot of self-deception, McAdams ended up with almost identical powers to the god that he worshipped. This resulted in some less than stellar mental issues though, as he went a little power crazy and tried to rid an entire city of mortals. Coming in at number 4, we've got Exodus. Born as Bennett du Paris back in the 1300s, this mutant is all about changing up the world order. He has and always will believe that mutants should be in charge of the world, with humans as the inferior race. This was true before 2099 and remains true in said futuristic world. Showing up after a long sleep, Exodus attempted to force his rule upon X Nation. They weren't too happy with this, so Exodus defeated them. Using telepathy, teleportation, and resurrection, he's almost undefeatable. Factor in that he refused to save the humans before Mademoiselle Strange teleported the survivors away, and you've got one bad, powerful dude. Coming in at number 3, we've got Punisher. Even way off at the turn of the next century, Punisher's gotta punish. Frank Castle no longer wears the gigantic skull, instead it's a guy by the name of Jake Gallows, which is appropriate. This ex-Thorite actually grew up with Cecil McAdams as his reverend, but we'll save that story for a rainy day. He lost his family to violence and then came across the old war journals of the original Punisher. With this, he decided he would dedicate his life to punishing. At first, he was a member of the pay-per-use police service, but eventually ended up as Doom's Minister of Punishment. As one would expect, this makes it very dangerous to be deemed a criminal in the future. Strapping, angry, and constantly firing guns in both hands, the Punisher does what he does best. Hell, he even has a hand in killing the new Thor. Coming in at number 2, we've got Spider-Man. If you want a crazy origin story, look no further. In the future, there's one company that seems to have an upper hand over the rest. Alchemax. Miguel O'Hara was a scientist working for them, reluctantly performing genetic experiments on less than willing test subjects. After turning a man into a horrid beast that died quickly, O'Hara decided he'd had enough. However, when discussing this with his boss, he accepted a drink that turned out to be laced with Rapture, a highly addictive substance that bonds with the DNA of the person using it. This was supposed to keep O'Hara addicted, and therefore an employee of the company that produced it for the foreseeable future. In order to reverse this addiction though, O'Hara attempted to rewrite his own genetic code. This procedure was sabotaged by his boss, but ended up including some spider DNA in the process. Thus, Spider-Man 2099 was born. Jam-packed with spider powers, but actually lacking any form of spider sense, O'Hara decided to start fighting crime. Donning a spider suit to hide his identity, he puts his powers to use. Increased strength, agility, stamina, regeneration, some telepathy, claws and fangs, and even spinnerets that generate organic web, and more. Spider-Man is always a fan favorite, that's for sure. Finally, at number 1, we've got Dr. Doom. Unlike most of the other heroes on this list, Doom isn't a clone or a copy or even offspring of another individual, it's still Doom. After disappearing for decades, Dr. Doom decided to upgrade his armor and make a triumphant return, and triumphantly return he does. Coming back in full force, he manages to retake the United States and force his way into a leadership role. Like I said earlier, he employs Jake Gallows as his Minister of Punishment and begins ruling with an iron fist. There really is no stopping Doom, even in the future.